I stared at the bank statement in my trembling hands, the numbers blurring, as my coffee grew cold on the kitchen table. $3,000. Gone. Just like that from the Maple Grove Community Garden fundraiser account that I'd helped Patricia manage for the past 5 years. Meredith, are you listening? My daughter's voice crackled through the phone speaker. I said Jake got into Northwestern. That's wonderful, honey. I forced enthusiasm into my voice while scanning the withdrawal dates again. October 3rd, October 10th, October 17th. 3 separate transactions each for $1,000, all bearing Patricia's signature as co-treasurer. I'm so proud of him. Mom, you sound distracted. Is everything okay? I set the statement down and picked up my mug, the ceramic warm against my palms. Outside my kitchen window, the sugar maple in my backyard had turned the color of burnt amber, its leaves drifting onto the deck where Tom and I used to drink our morning coffee together. 3 years since his heart attack, and I still sometimes set out 2 mugs. I'm fine, Sarah. Just dealing with some book club business. The mysterious book club that never seems to read books anymore. I laughed despite my churning stomach. We read plenty. We just also happen to manage half the community projects in town. Right. Well, tell Mrs. Henderson I said hello. I know how much you love your weekly gossip sessions. It's not gossip, it's... I caught myself before launching into my usual defense of the Maple Grove Literary Society. Sarah was 32, a marketing executive in Chicago, and couldn't understand why 6 women in their 50s and 60s gathered every Thursday evening to discuss everything from Toni Morrison to the town's pothole problem. Never mind. Give Jake my congratulations. After hanging up, I spread the bank statements across my oak table, the same table where Tom and I had paid bills for 28 years. The pattern was unmistakable. Every Thursday, the day after our book club meetings, Patricia had made a withdrawal. Always a round number. Always signed in her careful cursive. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Kowalski. Running late for tonight. Can you set up the folding chairs? Dolores is bringing her famous snickerdoodles. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. How could I sit in Patricia's living room, eating cookies, and pretending to discuss this month's selection? Where the crawdads sing, when I knew what I knew Patricia, who'd organized meals for every grieving family in town for the past decade. Patricia, who'd held my hand through Tom's funeral and driven me to my first grief counseling session because I was too proud to ask anyone else. I typed back, of course. See you at 7. The October wind rattled my windows as I pulled into Patricia's driveway on Elm Street. Her colonial sat behind a row of perfectly pruned boxwood's yellow mums, flanking the front steps like sentries. The same house where we'd held book club for 3 years running, ever since her arthritis made it difficult for her to drive at night. Meredith. Patricia opened the door before I could knock her silver hair freshly styled in soft waves. She wore a burgundy cardigan that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with such compassion when Tom died. Come in. I've got the coffee brewing. I followed her into the living room, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla candles and old books. Patricia's house always smelled like comfort, like the grandmother I'd never had. She'd arranged 6 mismatched chairs in a circle around her coffee table, already set with cream and sugar in delicate china cups. How are you feeling? I asked, setting down my purse and the bank statements that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Your back still giving you trouble? Oh, you know how it is. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Some days better than others. Dr. Martinez says, I need to slow down, but you know me. I did know her. Patricia Henley had been the volunteer coordinator at St. Mark's for 15 years, had run the community garden project since its inception, and had never missed a book club meeting even when she'd had pneumonia last winter. She was the kind of woman who brought casseroles to new neighbors and remembered everyone's birthday. The front door chimed, and Dolores Martinez bustled in with a covered plate and an armload of books. Sorry, Miguel insisted on helping me carry everything to the car. She kissed Patricia's cheek and handed me the plate. Snickerdoodles, as promised, still warm. Linda arrived next, shaking raindrops from her umbrella. It's starting to pour out there. Good thing I brought my rain boots. She was the youngest of our group at 48, a high school English teacher who brought fresh energy to our discussions and occasionally shocked us with her insights into contemporary fiction. Joyce and Betty arrived together as they always did. Joyce, a retired librarian with steel grey hair and opinions to match, had founded the book club 12 years ago. Betty, soft-spoken and gentle, worked part-time at the community centre and had a gift for remembering every detail of every book we'd ever read. Before we start, Patricia said, settling into her usual chair by the fireplace, I wanted to give everyone an update on the garden fundraiser. My stomach clenched. I watched Patricia's face as she opened a manila folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. Her expression was serene, almost proud. We've raised just over $7,000 so far, she announced. The Fall Harvest Festival booth did better than expected, and Mrs. Chen's donation drive at the senior center brought in $500 alone. That's wonderful, Joyce said. When do we need to place the order for the new greenhouse? I'm thinking we should wait until spring, Patricia replied. Give us more time to reach our $10,000 goal. I bit my tongue, tasting copper. According to my calculations, we should have had over 10,000 already. The missing 3,000 would have put us well over our target. Meredith, you've been quiet, Dolores observed. Everything all right? All eyes turned to me. Patricia's gaze was steady, questioning. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if there was some explanation I'd missed. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the dates. I'm fine, I managed. Just thinking about the book. Oh, yes. Betty clapped her hands together. I couldn't put it down. The way Delia Owens wrote about the marsh, you could almost smell the salt air. The character development was exquisite, Linda added. Kaya's journey from isolation to self-discovery really resonated with me. We settled into our familiar rhythm, discussing themes and characters, while the rain drummed against the windows. Patricia made thoughtful observations about resilience and community, her voice warm with conviction. How could someone who spoke so eloquently about moral complexity be stealing from the very community she claimed to serve? I think what struck me most, Joyce said, was how Kaya learned to trust again after being abandoned by everyone she loved. Trust is everything, Patricia agreed. Once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. The irony wasn't lost on me. I studied Patricia's face, searching for any sign of guilt or discomfort. But she looked genuinely moved by the discussion. Maybe that was what hurt most, that she could sit here talking about trust and abandonment, while she systematically betrayed the faith we'd all placed in her. Meredith, Betty said gently, you look like you have something on your mind about the book. I did have something on my mind, but it wasn't about Kaya or the marshlands of North Carolina. It was about the woman sitting across from me. The woman who'd become like a sister to me over the past 5 years, and how I was going to find the courage to confront her. I was thinking about how sometimes the people closest to us can surprise us, I said carefully. How we think we know someone, and then we discover we don't know them at all. Patricia's coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. That's very true. People can be quite complex. The meeting wrapped up at 9:30, as it always did. Joyce packed her notebook, filled with her careful observations about plot structure and symbolism. Dolores gathered her empty cookie plate and promised to bring banana bread next week. Linda and Betty shared an umbrella on their way to the parking area. I lingered helping Patricia stack chairs and load the dishwasher. The domesticity of the task felt surreal, given what I knew, but I couldn't bring myself to leave without saying something. Patricia, I began, then stopped. How did you accuse your closest friend of theft? How did you destroy a friendship that had sustained you through the worst period of your life? Yes, dear, the garden fundraiser. I've been looking at the account statements. Patricia's hands stilled on the dish towel. Oh, there are some discrepancies. Some withdrawals I don't remember discussing. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Patricia turned to face me, her brown eyes unreadable. I think there might be some confusion about the bookkeeping, she said quietly. Why don't we go over everything together next week? It wasn't a denial, but it wasn't an admission either. I nodded, my throat tight with unshed tears. That sounds good. Next week. I drove home through the rain, my windshield wipers beating a rhythm that matched my racing heart. The streets of Maple Grove looked different somehow, as if the revelation had shifted my perspective on everything familiar. The Methodist church where Patricia volunteered every Sunday. The community center where she coordinated the monthly senior luncheons. The small-town kindness I'd always taken for granted suddenly felt fragile, uncertain. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table staring at the bank statements again. $3,000. For some people, that might not seem like a fortune, but for our little community garden, it represented months of bake sales and car washes, countless hours of volunteer work from people who believed in growing something beautiful together. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Meredith. It's Linda. I just wanted to check on you. You seemed upset tonight. Linda's teacher instincts had always been sharp. She could spot a troubled student from across a classroom, and apparently the same applied to book club members. I'm okay, I lied. Just tired. Yeah, are you sure you were asking some pretty pointed questions about trust and betrayal? I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Linda was practical and level-headed, someone who dealt with teenage drama and administrative politics every day. Maybe she could help me figure out how to handle this situation. Can you come over? I asked. I need to talk to someone. On my way. Linda arrived 15 minutes later, her dark hair still damp from the rain. I made fresh coffee while she hung her jacket on my kitchen chair, the same chair Tom used to occupy during our morning routine. What's going on? She asked, without preamble. And don't tell me it's nothing. I've seen that look before, usually right before a parent-teacher conference goes sideways. I placed the bank statements in front of her and watched her face change as she processed the numbers. Linda had a master's degree in English and a minor in mathematics. She didn't need long to spot the pattern. Patricia, she whispered, $3,000 over 3 weeks. always on Fridays, the day after our meetings. Linda leaned back in her chair, running her hands through her hair. Jesus, Meredith. Are you sure there's not some explanation? Like what? I don't know. Maybe she's covering expenses that haven't been reimbursed yet. Maybe there's another account we don't know about. I appreciated Linda's desire to find an innocent explanation, but I'd been treasurer of my church women's group for 8 years before Tom died. I knew how financial records worked, and these didn't add up to anything but theft. She's been under a lot of stress lately, Linda continued. Her daughter's divorce, her medical bills. Since when does stress justify stealing from a community project? It doesn't. I'm just trying to understand. Linda rubbed her temples. God, this is going to destroy the book club and the garden project. People trust us with their donations. That was what kept me awake that night. Not just the betrayal of a friend, but the ripple effect it would have on our entire community. The garden project had become a source of pride for Maple Grove, something that brought neighbors together and beautified a corner of town that had been an eyesore for decades. If word got out that funds had been mismanaged, would people still be willing to contribute their time and money? I tossed and turned until dawn, then made coffee, and called in sick to my part-time job at the library. I needed time to think, to figure out the right way to handle this mess. Around 10, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Patricia, standing on my front porch, holding a covered dish and wearing a tentative smile. I brought you some of that zucchini bread you like, she said when I opened the door. I thought maybe we could talk. I led her to the kitchen, the same space where I'd confronted the reality of her theft the night before. She set the bread on my counter and turned to face me, her hands clasped in front of her, like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. I know what you're thinking, she began. Do you think I took money from the garden fund? The directness of her statement caught me off guard. I'd expected denials, excuses, maybe even anger. Instead, Patricia looked tired and sad, older than her 63 years. Did you? She sank into one of my kitchen chairs, the same chairs Tom and I had bought when we first moved to this house. It's complicated. Stealing is pretty straightforward, Patricia. I didn't steal it. Her voice was quiet but firm. I borrowed it. Borrowed it for what? Patricia's hands trembled as she reached for her purse. She pulled out a stack of papers, medical bills, insurance statements, pharmacy receipts. The pile was thick, held together with a rubber band that looked like it might snap under the pressure. My insurance didn't cover the new arthritis medication Dr. Martinez prescribed. The generic version wasn't working anymore, and the pain was getting unbearable. I couldn't sleep, could barely get dressed in the morning. I picked up one of the bills. $1,500 for a month's supply of medication. Another for $1,200. A third for $800. Patricia, why didn't you tell us we could have helped? With what you're all struggling too. Linda's paying off student loans. Joyce is taking care of her mother Dolores, and Miguel are saving for their granddaughter's college. And you. She looked at me with such tenderness that my heart broke a little. You're still figuring out how to live on Tom's pension. She wasn't wrong. Since Tom's death, I'd been carefully managing our modest savings, trying to make his life insurance last while I adjusted to living on my library salary and his social security benefits. But I would have found a way to help her. I was going to pay it back, Patricia continued. I have a buyer interested in my mother's china cabinet, the antique one from Germany. It should bring in enough to cover what I borrowed, plus interest. But you didn't tell anyone what you were doing. You let us think we had more money than we actually have. I know it was wrong. I was in so much pain, Meredith, and I was ashamed. I've spent my whole life helping other people, and here I was, unable to afford my own medication. I studied her face, this woman who'd been my anchor through the darkest period of my life. The Patricia I knew was proud, independent, fiercely devoted to her community. She'd rather go without groceries than ask for help, rather suffer in silence than admit weakness. How long have you been struggling with this? I asked. Since last spring. The arthritis got worse over the winter, and the medical bills started piling up. I thought I could handle it on my own, but... She gestured helplessly at the stack of papers. Pride goes before a fall, right? I made fresh coffee while Patricia sat quietly at my table. Outside, the October wind was stripping the last leaves from the oak trees, leaving them bare and vulnerable against the grey sky. I thought about trust and forgiveness, about the complex ways people could disappoint and surprise you. I have to tell the others, I said finally. Patricia's face went pale. I understand, but I think we should do it together at Thursday's meeting. You want me to confess to the book club. I want you to explain what happened. These women care about you, Patricia. They'll be hurt by what you did, but they'll also want to help. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. What if they don't forgive me? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But hiding it won't make it go away. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the wind scatter leaves across my backyard. Finally, Patricia spoke. I've been so scared, she admitted. Scared of being a burden, scared of losing my independence, scared of people seeing me as weak or needy. You're not weak, I told her. You're human. We all are. That afternoon, I called Linda and asked her to meet me for coffee at the corner cafe Maple Grove's attempt at a bohemian gathering place. With its mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, it was where the younger crowd hung out. But Linda and I had discovered they made excellent lattes and minded their own business. So what's the plan? Linda asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Are we confronting her at Thursday's meeting? Because I have to tell you, the thought of that makes me nauseous. She's going to tell everyone herself about the money and why she took it. I filled Linda in on my conversation with Patricia, watching her expression shift from shock to sympathy to something that looked like relief. Medical bills, Linda said finally. I should have guessed. Do you know how many of my colleagues are working second jobs just to afford their prescription medications? The thing is, she's right about all of us struggling. We're all so proud, so determined to handle everything ourselves. Maybe that's part of the problem. Linda stirred her latte thoughtfully. You know what this reminds me of? That scene in Where the Crawdads Sing, where Kaya finally lets Tate help her. Sometimes accepting help is harder than giving it. I thought about that as I drove home. Patricia had spent decades taking care of everyone else, organizing meals for sick neighbors, coordinating volunteers for community events, offering a shoulder to cry on whenever someone needed it. But when she needed help, she'd rather steal from a project she loved than admit her vulnerability. Thursday evening arrived grey and drizzly, typical October weather in Maple Grove. I arrived at Patricia's house, early as promised, and found her in the kitchen arranging cookies on a plate with shaking hands. How are you holding up? I asked. I threw up twice this afternoon, she admitted. I keep thinking about Joyce's face when she finds out. You know how she feels about fiscal responsibility. Joyce, Our former librarian had strong opinions about everything from late fees to budget overruns. She was fair, but exacting, the kind of person who balanced her checkbook to the penny and never missed a payment deadline. Joyce is also fair, I reminded Patricia. She'll listen to your explanation. The others arrived promptly at 7, as they always did. Dolores brought homemade empanadas instead of cookies, explaining that she'd had extra filling from dinner. Betty carried a stack of library books about gardening research for the spring planting season. Joyce had printed out information about greenhouse suppliers, her usual thoroughness on display. We settled into our circle, but instead of opening our books, Patricia cleared her throat. Before we discuss anything else, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need to tell you all something. The room went silent, except for the tick of the mantel clock and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Patricia's hands clutched the arms of her chair so tightly, her knuckles were white. I took money from the garden fund, she said in a rush. $3,000. I borrowed it for medical expenses, and I was planning to pay it back, but I should have asked permission first. I should have told you what was happening. The silence stretched on. Joyce's face had gone completely blank, her usual animated expression frozen. Dolores looked confused, as if she hadn't quite processed what Patricia was saying. Betty's eyes were wide with concern. Medical expenses, Linda prompted gently. Patricia nodded, then explained about her arthritis medication, the insurance coverage, the mounting bills that had pushed her to desperation. She showed them the same paperwork she'd shared with me, her voice growing stronger as she continued. I know what I did was wrong, she concluded. I violated your trust, and I put the project at risk. If you want to remove me as co-treasurer, I understand. If you want me to leave the book club, I understand that too. Joyce was the first to speak. How much pain were you in? The question seemed to surprise Patricia. What? Your arthritis? How much pain were you experiencing? It was pretty bad. Some days I couldn't open jars or hold a book for more than a few minutes. Joyce's expression softened slightly. Why didn't you ask for help? I didn't want to be a burden. A burden. Dolores's voice cracked with emotion. Patricia, you've been helping everyone in this town for 20 years. You brought meals to my family when Miguel had his heart surgery. You drove Betty to her sister's funeral in Springfield. You organized the fundraiser for the fire department when they needed new equipment. That's different, Patricia protested. How is it different? Betty asked quietly. How is your need any less important than ours? I watched this exchange with a mixture of sadness and hope. These women, my friends, were responding exactly as I'd hoped they would, with compassion rather than condemnation, with a desire to understand rather than to punish. The money, Joyce said, ever practical. When can you pay it back? I'm selling my mother's china cabinet. The antique dealer thinks it might bring in $4,000, maybe more. I could have the money back to the account by next week. And then what? Linda asked. What happens the next time you can't afford your medication? Patricia looked lost. I don't know. Here's what we're going to do, Joyce announced, sliding into her take charge mode. We're going to set up a medical emergency fund for all of us. Small monthly contributions, maybe $10 or $15 each. When someone has an unexpected medical expense, they can apply for help. Like a credit union, Betty asked. Exactly. We'll call it the Literary Society Mutual Aid Fund. But what about the garden money? Patricia asked. I still need to pay that back. The china cabinet sale will cover that, Dolores said. But Patricia, from now on, you come to us when you're struggling. That's what friends do. I felt tears prick my eyes as I watched these women. My chosen family rally around Patricia despite her betrayal. They were choosing community over judgment, healing over punishment. There's something else we need to discuss, I said. The larger question of transparency. If we're going to manage community funds, we need better systems in place. Monthly financial reports. Joyce agreed. Full disclosure of all transactions. And maybe we should have 3 signatories instead of 2, Linda suggested. Better checks and balances. We spent the next hour hammering out the details of our new financial policies. Our copies of Where the Crawdads Sing forgotten on the coffee table. It felt appropriate. Somehow we were creating our own community, our own support system, our own way of caring for each other. I motion that Patricia continue as co-treasurer, Joyce said as the evening wound down. With the understanding that the new policies apply to all of us. Seconded, Dolores said immediately. All in favor? I asked. 5 hands went up. Patricia's stayed in her lap, tears streaming down her face. I don't deserve this, she whispered. None of us deserve the grace we receive, Betty said gently. We just accept it and try to do better. As the others left that night, Patricia pulled me aside. How did you know? She asked. How did you know they'd forgive me? I didn't, I admitted. But I hoped they would, because that's what love looks like. It sees clearly and chooses compassion anyway. The following week brought the first snow of the season, a light dusting that turned Maple Grove into a postcard scene. Patricia sold her mother's china cabinet for $4,200 and returned the $3,000 to the garden fund with interest. The extra money became the seed for our mutual aid fund. Joyce, true to her word, implemented a new financial tracking system that would make a bank examiner proud. Linda researched grants for low-income seniors needing prescription assistance and found 3 programs Patricia qualified for. Dolores started a weekly check-in system where we all texted each other on Sundays just to see how everyone was doing. And Betty quiet. Betty, who never said much during our heated literary discussions, surprised us all by researching community gardening programs in other towns and finding a model for sustainable funding that didn't rely solely on donations. By December, the Maple Grove Community Garden had not only reached its $10,000 goal, but exceeded it by $1,500. More importantly, the 6 women of the Literary Society had learned something valuable about the difference between independence and isolation, between strength and stubbornness. At our Christmas meeting held at my house for the first time since Tom's death, Patricia stood to make an announcement. And I've been thinking about trust, she said, holding up our December selection, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. How it's not just about being honest with others, but about being honest with ourselves. About admitting when we need help, when we're struggling, when we can't handle everything alone. Trust is also about second chances, Joyce added. About believing that people can make mistakes and still be fundamentally good, and about community, Dolores chimed in. About creating the kind of environment where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable. I looked around my living room at these 5 women who had become my anchors in a world that sometimes felt unmoored. Linda grading papers while she listened to our discussion because she never stopped caring about her students. Joyce fierce and demanding, but ultimately fair. Dolores, whose warm heart had room for everyone's troubles. Betty, whose quiet wisdom often cut straight to the heart of things. And Patricia, who had learned to receive care as gracefully as she gave it. You know what I think, I said, setting down my wineglass and settling deeper into my armchair. I think trust isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. And sometimes you have to rebuild it from scratch. Like a garden, Betty said softly. You prepare the soil plant, the seeds tend carefully and hope for the best. Even when the weather doesn't cooperate, Patricia added with a rueful smile. Especially then, I agreed. As the evening wound down and my friends gathered their coats and books, I thought about the year that was ending. It had brought loss and disappointment, moments, when I'd questioned everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. But it had also brought grace, forgiveness, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to belong to a community. Patricia was the last to leave lingering, as she always did to help with cleanup. Meredith, she said as I walked her to the door. Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right. We all deserve the chance to make things right, I replied, echoing Betty's words from that October evening. That's what friends are for. I watched from my front window as Patricia made her way carefully down my icy walkway to her car, her movements easier now that her pain was properly managed. The street was quiet. Most of my neighbors already settled in for the night. But I could see warm light glowing from windows, up and down Elm Street families, and friends gathered together creating their own small circles of belonging. Sometimes the people who know us best are the ones who see us clearly enough to call us on our mistakes and love us enough to help us fix them. This is a dramatized story created for entertainment and inspiration, not medical, legal, or financial advice.